So guys, today I have the unfortunate task of informing all of my fellow Voyagers that VR is dying. Yes, again.
I played video games 20 years ago that looked better than what we're looking at right now. There are signs consumer interest is falling too. The NPD group tells CNBC spending on VR headsets fell 2% this year to a little over $1 billion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say that I have the fortune of informing you all that VR is absolutely thriving and has boomed in popularity.
But guys, the industry is not giving up. In February, Sony will start selling its new VR rig for the PlayStation 5. That will obviously be entirely focused on gaming though. And then there's Apple, finally expected to enter the space with that long rumored headset at the end of the year.
So wait a second, which one is it? Welcome to the simulation inside the simulation. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and in my ever-growing quest to provide insight into the world of VR, we will be taking a definitive look into the current state of it, as well as wildly speculate about the short to mid-term future of VR as a whole. Since making its way into the mainstream consciousness back in 2016 with the grand unveiling of the Oculus Rift, we have seen a lot of growth in the VR sector at large, as we have seen a technology that was once viewed as a speculative afterthought turn into a full-fledged virtual reality. With landmark headsets and games such as the Valve Index, Oculus Quest 2, Half-Life Alyx, Boneworks, showing gamers what the future of gaming really can be. But we're not here to talk about what could be, we are here to talk about what the current state of VR is right here, right now in 2023. For those of you just looking for the answer, and the long and short of it guys, the current state and future success of VR is entirely dependent on this new generation of hardware, but with a few major caveats of which we'll be getting to right now. For the specific scope of this video, we are going to be focusing on the evolution of modern VR technology using the 2017 release of the Oculus Rift as our starting point and officially kicking off a proper Generation 1 in VR gaming. But again, we're not here to discuss the past, we are here to talk about today, here, now in 2023. And if we base our opinion on the state of VR purely on the mood and vibe of the VR community itself, it's definitely a time of great uncertainty for many as we've watched what started off as a new and exciting technology get absorbed by mega conglomerates that care more about being first in the space versus doing VR correctly, culminating in the closure of one of VR's most supported titles, Echo VR. But let's take a step back and just look at the numbers for a bit. I know it's not exactly the most exciting thing to see in a YouTube video, but it's important for context purposes. VR currently holds a 1% market share in the gaming space, which in itself is not inherently bad, as we are dealing with, as I've stated before in an earlier video, guys, selling a completely new technology. Whereas consoles have been long established and have already gone mainstream, keep in mind that modern VR technology has only been around for about 6 years and is still working on onboarding new adopters. However, where the numbers do start to look a little scary for VR is when you start to take a look at the market over the last year or so, starting of course with the disastrous release of Meta's Quest Pro, the company's flagship post-Oculus acquisition headset, which saw mixed reviews from critics and disdain from the VR community due to its high cost of $1,500, and the corporate overload vibe to it really didn't help it, as the emphasis of this project was to sell directly to corporate entities as opposed to focusing on the bread and butter of the VR world. Once again guys, the gamers. Fast forward to January 2023 and reports of the Quest 2 sales dropping by 7% in 2022 began to circulate, along with the news that Reality Labs lost $13.7 billion in the same year alone. Then in February, the news that Meta-owned studio Ready at Dawn would be shutting down all servers for the fan-beloved title Echo VR. And finally, just within the last week or so of constructing this video, the double dose of news hit that Meta was planning a further round of massive layoffs, with eyes focused squarely on Meta's Reality Labs division, compounded by the announcement of major price slashes on both the 256GB version of the Quest 2 dropping from $499 down to $429, as well as the higher-end Meta Quest Pro seeing a price decrease of $500 less than 6 months after its initial release. But the purpose of this video is not to indict Meta, guys. They do that well enough on their own.
Legs.
Legs. Microsoft's recent layoffs of more than 10,000 employees have led to widespread doubt about the immediate future of their HoloLens and headset-based projects. TikTok parent company ByteDance has announced that they will be laying off hundreds of employees working at its headset company, Pico Interactive, who just dropped the Pico 4 last year. Sony, even though they've started off this generation 3 of modern headsets, have been fighting reports that their sales expectations for the PSVR 2 have been halved, with the company now allegedly expected to sell just 1 million PSVR 2 units by the end of this month, as opposed to their 2 million units that were previously projected. And both Tencent and Apple have either entirely scrapped headset plans or had them massively delayed, all within the last calendar year. I say all this to say that VR gaming is in an interesting place at the moment, as the VR industry is more directly tied to the whims of Silicon Valley, which itself was absolutely massacred financially in the last 12 months. And as we all know, investors aren't too keen on the dwindling share price train. Thus, we see the decimation of a lot of VR employees from these tech giants, leading to a lot of uncertainty running rampant within the VR community. Now, that's not to say that things are all doom and gloom in VR land, guys, as there have been several landmark moments over the last couple of years. VR, while again only being 1% of the overall gaming market, has seen substantial growth since the release of the Rift, with VR headset sales booming from 3.8 million individual units sold in 2017 to 19.14 million individual headsets sold in 2022 alone. With Meta's combined Quest sales accounting for around 20 million of those sales in that time span, enough for a 75% market share, and its standalone Quest 2 really making a big splash in mainstream consciousness. Also, as mentioned earlier, the PSVR 2 officially ushered in Gen 3 of modern VR gaming back in February, with critics and gamers alike praising its visual fidelity, new sense controllers, as well as the overall improvement in terms of comfortability. And of course, guys, we've seen a litany of very successful VR titles appear over the last couple of years, like the Resident Evil 4 remake, Lone Echo 2, Bone Lab, and of course Gran Turismo 7, all being absolutely flames in terms of quality. Now, for the sake of providing counter arguments to the sky is falling tone to the first half of this video, it's logical to think that with the tech sector being down bad with a capital B, that these large corporations are predictably making huge budget cuts, starting with the production of burgeoning technologies like virtual reality, as opposed to the primary income earners, like things like advertising revenue or physical hardware sales, particularly in Apple's case, thus making the hit to the VR industry a symptom of a larger issue as opposed to the cause. Which of course in turn may have led to the unpopular decision on the part of Ready at Dawn to axe Echo VR altogether in an effort to cut costs, keep those pesky investors happy, and cook up their next project, which is presumably already in development. I personally would even argue that Meta's recent failings are more based on the fact that people don't trust Mark Zuckerberg, as they see him as this robotic humanoid figure devoid of, actual feelings.
But it is going to bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
But the fact that the largest provider of VR headsets worldwide is being driven by Zuckerberg may actually be hurting VR solely based off of this mistrust, as potential new adopters may be turned off by, well, legs. So where does that leave us now? VR is undoubtedly at a crossroads moment that will dictate whether VR continues to explode in popularity or goes the route of HD DVD technology and falls into the annals of time. So I have compiled a list of the 3 major things that are absolutely paramount to the short to midterm success of VR and potentially the overall success of the technology as a whole moving forward. Firstly, we need more indie studios to grow and not just get absorbed by larger studios, to truly allow for the creativity and passion of these studios to shine through and provide gamers with well-crafted experiences, not driven purely by profit, because ultimately gamers love great games. I know, go figure, and we will spend money to do so. period, point blank. Secondly, and I know this is going to sound a little contradictory to the first point, but we do need active support from AAA gaming studios in producing more Half-Life Alyx-like experiences, mixed in with efforts from smaller studios to produce a much more robust VR market overall, to maintain a much higher level of retention across the board, because as we all know, the major issue with VR gaming right now is retention. Guys, time and time again, I have heard the notion of VR having no games persist, and this is oftentimes due to these people knocking out Half-Life Alyx and Asgard's Wrath and maybe another title or two, and then they really do feel lost looking for that next big AAA title that, as we guys know, simply is not there yet. Now, of course, with Sony's PSVR 2 officially starting the next generation of modern VR gaming, there were no releases from any gaming industry's top 10 largest developers, Sony excluded obviously, but this is a major issue for VR gaming at the moment, because like it or not, guys, brand recognition is a real thing that, well, exists. So VR needs AAA developed games at a much more consistent rate to onboard new players. However, in a bit of a catch-22, these developers also need to be able to financially justify such an undertaking, and the harsh reality is the market isn't really large enough to do so at the moment. And the third, and in my opinion, most important thing in all of this for VR's continued success is the dire need for a clear generational transition, with the PSVR 2, of course, kicking things off. And what I mean by that, guys, is obviously there are better looking, more powerful headsets than the PSVR 2. However, these are not priced at an average consumer level, especially when factoring in the cost of a solid VR ready PC. But what VR needs right now is a clear and defined next-gen market with improved graphics and performance from standalone headsets or console-tethered ones. The release of the Quest 3 is going to be one that is closely watched, particularly following the lukewarm reception of the Quest Pro, and if Meta can provide significant graphical improvement with the Quest 3, which according to VR analyst Brad Lynch is rumored to sport pancake lenses, a resolution increase of 30% over the Quest 2, and possess double the processing power, they have the potential to not only bring in new VR gamers, but retain them as well, which we all know is the biggest issue in VR right now. VR needs to consolidate its consumer level headset market down to a big 3 or 4 so that people will know what to buy and studios will have a more standardized group of devices to optimize for, thus creating a better overall gaming experience for VR gamers. And I honestly do think that we're actually in a good spot in this regard, as I'm of the belief that it will eventually end up being a Meta, Sony, Vive, Valve dominated market. I'm of the personal belief that Apple will not really do very much in the VR space. So I do think it will feel like that industry transition in gaming that occurred between the mid 80s and about 2001, but in the digital age, of course, so at a much more accelerated pace. Because, you know, pancake gamers know which system is the most current iteration. Casual VR adopters, not so much. I personally love the wide array of headsets out there, guys, particularly for Steam VR. Some of them are truly magnificent, but for the average Joe, they really only want to know 3 things. Which one is the newest? How much is it? And where do I pay? Simple as that. So guys, that just about concludes today's video. I know it was a longer one, so I just want to say thank you to those of you who stuck it out through the end. A big round of applause coming to you guys. It really does mean a lot to me. Let me know in the comments below what you think the current state of VR is. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Do you agree? Do you disagree? If so, leave me angry comments if you disagree. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you did enjoy. Guys, this is the make it or break it generation for modern VR gaming. I think this is going to be the one to watch, especially with the Quest 3 coming out. The PSVR 2 is already here. So it's definitely going to be interesting to really jump into, and I can't wait to continue taking that voyage with you guys, hopefully on a much more frequent basis, right? Trying to get more consistent with that, so I do apologize. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I am Tooodamngolden, your VR Voyager, and thanks again for joining me in the simulation inside the simulation.